The Texas Department of Transportation Houston District would like to welcome you to this virtual public meeting with in-person option. This presentation will provide information on the Gulf Freeway Planning and Environmental Linkages Study, also known as a PEL study. The PEL study extends along Interstate 45 south from Interstate 69, US 59, in downtown Houston to Beltway 8 south. My name is Daisy Arona, and I am part of the study team. I would like to thank you for participating in this public meeting. This is the second public meeting being conducted for the Gulf Freeway PEL study. This is a pre-recorded presentation. During the virtual presentation, you may pause the video and navigate forward or backward using your video player. If you experience technical difficulties with the virtual public meeting, please call Tanisha Smith at 713-802-5560. You may also request special accommodation assistance accessing public meeting information and materials and language interpretation needs other than English and Spanish. If you wish to submit a comment to be part of the official record of this public meeting, you may do so in the ways outlined at the end of this presentation. This virtual public meeting is being held in conjunction with two in-person public meetings, which will be held on Tuesday, July 12, 2022 at the Houston Texans YMCA and on Thursday, July 14, 2022 at Sagemont Church. Each meeting will take place from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. The information presented in the virtual public meeting at each in-person public meeting is identical, and the opportunities to comment do not differ. Several methods were used to notify the public, elected officials, and stakeholders about this public meeting. Stakeholders include representatives from federal and state agencies, county officials, city representatives, transit authorities, school districts, business districts, and more. Notices were sent to elected officials on Tuesday, June 14th, and mailed on Thursday, June 16th, to stakeholders and property owners that live adjacent to the corridor. Postcards were mailed to property owners within the neighborhood surrounding the corridor on Monday, June 20th. Flyers to advertise the public meeting were distributed on Friday, June 24th, to libraries, community centers, post offices, churches, grocery stores, and apartment complexes within the study area. The notice for this public meeting was published in La Voz and Buena Suerte Southeast on Wednesday, June 22nd, the Houston Defender on Thursday, June 23rd, and the Forward Times on Wednesday, June 29th. Public meeting information was posted to the TxDOT webpage on Monday, June 13th, and advertised through TxDOT social media in early July. A media release for the public meeting was also sent in early July. This virtual public meeting with two in-person options is being held to introduce the universe of alternatives for the Gulf Freeway PEL study and gather public input. You are encouraged to submit comments on the study materials and findings after listening to this presentation. In this presentation, I will provide a study overview, summarize the existing conditions and results of public meeting number 1, discuss the future no-build conditions, purpose and need and goals, describe the universe of alternatives and corresponding fatal flaw analysis, and outline the methods for submitting comments. First, I will provide an overview of the Gulf Freeway PEL study. TxDOT is evaluating a 14-mile section of Gulf Freeway in Harris County extending from I-69 US 59 in downtown Houston to Beltway 8 south. The Gulf Freeway corridor connects several communities, including the cities of Houston and South Houston, and serves multiple points of interest including downtown, midtown, East Downtown, and East End communities, University of Houston, Texas Southern University, Hobby Airport, and Gulf Gate Center. A PEL study is authorized by Appendix A to 23 Code of Federal Regulations CFR 450.212B and 450.318B, which allows TxDOT the ability to conduct this high-level approach to transportation decision-making. For a PEL study, environmental, community, and economic goals are considered early in the planning stages. This PEL study will set a vision for Gulf Freeway and guide future transportation improvement projects. It streamlines the planning process by minimizing duplication of effort and reducing delays in project implementation. The PEL study process encourages open and frequent public and stakeholder feedback. The information gathered and the analysis conducted, including preliminary review of environmental impacts associated with alternatives during the PEL study, would be used to inform future projects that result from the study's recommendations as the recommendations move into the next phase of project development. Additionally, the data collected and purpose and need documented during the PEL study will need to be tailored to the specific project and/or projects that come out of the study. We are in the middle of a multi-step process. Input is collected at every step of the process through stakeholder meetings and public meetings and is used to inform the analysis and decision-making process. The Gulf Freeway PEL study began with data collection, evaluation of existing conditions, and identification of environmental constraints. The identified existing corridor issues and deficiencies were used in combination with public input to formulate the purpose and need statement and establish goals for the future. The purpose and need and study goals will be used as performance measures to evaluate alternatives. Potential transportation alternatives, referred to as the universe of alternatives, have been identified based on input from the study team, stakeholders, and the public. A fatal flaw analysis will be used to reduce the number of alternatives. At this public meeting, we are presenting the universe of alternatives and preliminary fatal flaw analysis, which will be discussed in more detail later in this presentation. Input received during this public meeting will be used to finalize the fatal flaw analysis. Alternatives that move forward will be refined and evaluated to determine anticipated environmental impacts and measure their effectiveness to address the purpose and need and achieve the study goals. The evaluation results will be used to identify one or more recommended alternatives. At the end of this PEL study, the recommended alternatives and evaluation process will be documented in the final study report. After the PEL study, and if deemed feasible, the recommended alternatives will be broken into several projects, where the alternatives will be further refined to avoid, minimize, or mitigate impacts. Each project will follow the same process, which begins with an environmental review and preliminary design and is followed by detailed design and securing funding prior to starting construction. The following slides summarize the results of the existing conditions analysis that were presented at public meeting number 1. In order to develop improvements that best serve the users and community, we considered a large number of topics along the corridor, including roadway network characteristics, traffic operations, safety, demographics, land use, multimodal accommodations, infrastructure conditions, drainage, freight. The next slides will focus on the key topics. Shown on this slide are the existing typical sections for I-45. A typical section is intended to show a cross-section of the roadway as seen from the center of the roadway at a particular location. As illustrated here, there are variations to the number of lanes on both main lanes and frontage roads throughout the corridor. In general, I-45 today has 4 main lanes and 3 frontage road lanes in each direction, plus a reversible high-occupancy vehicle high-occupancy toll lane, also known as HOV/HOT lanes. This configuration is shown here as number 3. Now let's talk about traffic operations and level of service. Level of service is used to describe how congested a roadway is and how much delay is experienced by the traveling public. Level of service ranges from A, which is free-flowing traffic as shown in green, to F, which is heavily congested as shown in red. Level of service A through D is considered acceptable, and level of service E or F is considered unacceptable. We analyzed traffic operations during peak periods along the main lanes and reversible HOV/HOT lane. The main lane's level of service is represented by a solid line, and the HOV/HOT level of service is represented by a dashed line. During the AM peak, the northbound main lanes experience the most congestion. In the PM peak, both main lane directions experience congestion. In order to identify safety issues along the corridor, we collected and analyzed 5 years of crash data. The chart on the left compares the crash rates for each segment of the corridor to the statewide average crash rate for a similar facility. 3 segments have a crash rate above the statewide average, with the segment between I-69, US 59, and Spur 5 having a rate nearly 3 times the statewide average. Along the corridor, there were, on average, 6 crashes per day, 13 injury-related crashes per week, and 1 fatal crash per month. There were also 42 crashes involving pedestrians, 10 crashes involving bicyclists, and 508 crashes involving trucks. In addition to the evaluation of the crash rates, TxDOT also considered the condition of the current infrastructure, including pavement and bridges. The evaluation identified poor pavement conditions on the main lanes and frontage roads in several sections, most along the northern portion of the corridor. The bridge evaluation looked at vertical clearance, which is important because vertical clearances can limit the movement of oversized trucks. I-45 is a primary freight corridor that is used by oversized trucks. 3 bridges in the corridor have a vertical clearance less than 18.5 feet, which can limit the movement of freight along I-45. In order to identify needs for multimodal connections along I-45 South, the study team evaluated the corridor demographics including environmental justice, which identifies low-income, minority, and limited English proficient populations. Of the 172,000 people living in the study area, 88% are classified as an environmental justice population, 11% are zero-car households, and 12% commute by transit, walking, or biking. Each of these are higher than the statistics for the city of Houston. These populations typically rely more heavily on multimodal accommodations. The study team evaluated the existing and planned multimodal accommodations, including transit, bicycle, and pedestrian accommodations. Of the 18 intersections along the study corridor, 14 have pedestrian facilities and 1 has bicycle lanes. There are also 4 bicycle pedestrian bridges or trails that cross the corridor. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements at intersections and along the corridor would improve safety and encourage more multimodal transportation. This slide highlights existing and planned transit operations along the Gulf Freeway. Houston Metro operates 1 light rail, the Purple Line, that intersects the Gulf Freeway, 10 lower-frequency local bus routes, 6 high-frequency local bus routes, 3 free downtown shuttle routes, 6 park-and-ride routes, and 5 transit centers and park-and-rides. In addition, Harris County Transit operates 1 local bus route. The Metro Next plan, which identifies several future improvements within the study area, including the extension of the green and purple light rail lines to Hobby Airport, new regional express bus service along the corridor, new bus rapid transit service along the University corridor, and improvements to existing transit centers and 1 new transit center at Park Place Boulevard. This slide concludes the discussion on the existing condition analysis. Since this is the second public meeting, we will present a summary of the findings from the first public meeting. The first public meeting was held virtually in July 2020 due to the unique circumstance of the COVID-19 pandemic to avoid in-person contact. At the first virtual public meeting, the existing conditions analysis results were presented. The public meeting comment and online survey period was from July 16th through July 31st, 2020. During that time, TxDOT received 140 completed online surveys and 3 written comments. Common themes of the input received during the first public meeting are shown on the right and include traffic, congestion, safety, transit, air quality, among others. In the online survey, the public identified locations with safety, design, traffic, and intersections issues. The map shows the locations where issues were identified, with blue representing a low number of issues and yellow representing a high number of issues in that vicinity. A high concentration of issues were identified at the I-69, US 59, and I-610 interchanges. Those are consistent with the results of the existing conditions analysis. The top 3 priorities identified by the public in the online survey are improve safety, improve mobility, and improve transit. These priorities were closely followed by improve connectivity, minimize impacts, and improve bicycle and pedestrian access. This input was used to refine the purpose and need of the study. The rest of the presentation will discuss new information that was developed after public meeting number 1, starting with the future year 2045 no-build traffic conditions. No-build conditions include funded improvements along the corridor and is the baseline for developing alternatives for this PEL study. Typically, traffic forecasts are developed for 20 years in the future, which for this study is 2045. Future year 2045 was used as the forecast year since it aligns with our local planning organization's Houston-Galveston Area Council, or HGAC, Regional Transportation Plan. Historic traffic volume growth trends are used in combination with other factors such as anticipated population growth, land use changes, planned transportation improvements, and anticipated future travel mode choice, such as transit and HOV. All this information is used to identify an anticipated growth rate which is applied to the existing traffic volumes to forecast future volumes. This slide shows the existing and anticipated future daily traffic volumes in the year 2045 for the main lanes based on an annual growth rate of 1.4%. The highest future volumes, close to 350,000 vehicles per day, are anticipated in the vicinity of the I-610 interchange. This slide shows the existing and anticipated future daily traffic volumes in the year 2045 for the HOV-HOT lanes based on an annual growth rate of 0.6%. Similar to the main lane volumes, the highest volumes are in the vicinity of the I-610 interchange. In addition to the existing traffic operations, we also evaluate traffic operations for the future year 2045 no-build conditions. The main lane's level of service is represented by a solid line, and the HOV-HOT level of service is represented by a dashed line. While a few segments in both directions experience high congestion under the 2019 conditions, congestion is anticipated to get worse over time. During the 2045 morning peak travel period, the majority of the Gulf Freeway study corridor is expected to have high congestion. In 2019, the PM peak period experiences more congestion than the AM peak period. For the year 2045, the evening peak period will experience heavy congestion throughout the corridor. In addition to level of service, we also evaluated travel time. If there were no other vehicles on the road, it would take you 13 minutes to travel the full length of the study corridor at the posted speed. This is called the free flow travel time and is represented in green on the slide. The red bars indicate existing and anticipated future travel times. The largest increase in future travel time is anticipated in the northbound direction during the AM peak. Travel time today is about 47 minutes, and in the future it will take over an hour and a half. Similar to freeway operations, intersection operational analysis was completed for 2019 and future year 2045, which is also represented by level of service. Today, 6 out of 15 intersections experience heavy congestion. In the future, almost all the intersections will experience heavy congestion. The next section discusses the purpose and need and identifies goals for the study. A purpose and need is the foundation of a transportation study in which the alternatives are built upon. A need is a documented problem that exists within the corridor. The purpose defines what we need to do to meet the needs. Through the analysis done so far and the input received during the last public meeting, TxDOT identified 4 needs along the Gulf Freeway. The first need is safety issues. The safety analysis identified high crash rates on the main lanes, frontage roads, and intersections. Additionally, gaps in the multimodal network pose unsafe conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists. The second need is inadequate mobility of people and goods. Congestion and excessive delays are currently occurring along both the main lanes and frontage roads, and this is expected to get worse in the future. The third need is limited multimodal connectivity. Analysis identified limited accessibility to multimodal choices and disconnected existing infrastructure. The fourth need is roadway infrastructure deficiencies. Poor pavement conditions currently exist along the main lanes and frontage roads, and a few bridges over the main lanes have low vertical clearance. The purpose of the study is to improve safety, improve mobility, and reduce congestion, improve multimodal connections, and improve deficient infrastructure. Goals are used to shape the transportation solutions identified to address the study needs. The study goals guide the alternative development and evaluation process and balance guiding values. The goals were developed based on input received from the public, stakeholders, and agencies during the study outreach process. A total of 10 goals have been identified. Improve system-to-system interchanges, develop cost-efficient solutions, minimize impacts to the built and natural environment, pursue active stakeholders and public engagement throughout the study, support resiliency along the corridor, improve accessibility to activity and employment centers, support community transportation needs, adapt to future technologies, use innovative approach to maximize the right-of-way to move people and goods, enhance the corridor to promote economic development. Next, we will discuss the universe of alternatives and fatal flaw analysis. We are using a multi-level screening process to move from the universe of alternatives to the recommended alternatives. The universe of alternatives was developed based on input from the public, study team, agencies, local governments, and elected officials. We used a fatal flaw analysis to screen the alternatives. Any alternative that addresses at least one of the needs will move forward as a reasonable alternative. At this public meeting, we are presenting the draft fatal flaw analysis results and need your input to finalize the results. After your input is received, the reasonable alternatives will be identified and analyzed using engineering and environmental analysis to identify the recommended alternatives. Using input received from the public and stakeholders, the study team identified the universe of alternatives. The 15 alternatives have been broken into 5 categories: no build, which is used as a baseline for comparison purposes; frontage roads, which may include improvements to the travel lanes along the frontage roads and intersections; main lanes, which may include improvements to general use lanes, ramps, and interchanges; connectivity, which may include improvements to parallel and east-west routes; and multimodal, which may include improvements to special use lanes, transit, park and ride, and rail. The alternatives that met at least one of the study needs were identified as reasonable alternatives. If the alternative did not meet any of the study needs, it was eliminated from further consideration. Each of the reasonable alternatives was categorized as either a primary alternative or a supplemental alternative. Primary alternatives include improvements along the entire corridor and would fix major problems along Gulf Freeway by themselves. Supplemental alternatives include localized spot improvements and does not address the major problems by themselves. The results of the fatal flaw analysis are summarized in this table. Feel free to pause this slide to study the table in more detail. For virtual attendees, this table is available for download on the study webpage. For in-person attendees, this table is presented as a standalone exhibit board. The universe of alternatives are listed on the left. The middle columns list each of the 4 needs and the assessment for each alternative. A green check mark indicates that the alternative is anticipated to address that study need. A gray X indicates that the alternative is not anticipated to address that study need. All of the universe of alternatives are anticipated to address at least one of the study needs, therefore they will all move forward as reasonable alternatives. The next column indicates the agency responsible for the alternative. This is the agency that manages the facility and is responsible for the funding, implementation, and maintenance. Some alternatives include joint responsibility between multiple agencies. TxDOT has full or joint responsibility for all but 2 of the alternatives. Houston Metro has full responsibility for light rail and commuter rail. The last column categorizes each alternative as a primary or supplemental alternative. There are 4 primary alternatives and 9 supplemental alternatives. Light rail and commuter rail along the I-45 South Corridor are not included in Houston Metro's long-range plan and therefore will be dropped from further consideration. That concludes the new information that has been developed for the study. Let's talk about the next steps and how you can engage in the study. After this public meeting, we will compile input from the public and use the results to complete the fatal flaw analysis and selection of the reasonable alternatives. The reasonable alternatives will be further refined and screened and will be presented at the next public meeting planned for spring 2023. TxDOT is conducting an online survey that gives you an opportunity to provide interactive input on the study. To access this survey, go to www.TxDOT.gov and search for Gulf Freeway PEL Study or scan the QR code shown on the screen. The online survey will be available throughout the comment period for the public meeting, so be sure to take the survey by Friday, July 29th, 2022. The results of the online survey will be included in the public meeting documentation, which will be posted on the TxDOT website within the next few months. In addition to completing the online survey, feel free to provide written comments on the materials presented to date. The comment form is located on the study's website. Comments must be received via email or mailed and postmarked by Friday, July 29th, 2022 to be included in the public meeting documentation. You can submit written comments in the following ways: via email to hou-pio webmail@txdot.gov, via mail to the TxDOT Houston District, Attention Director of Project Development, P.O. Box 1386, Houston, Texas 77251-1386, online by visiting www.txdot.gov and searching in the upper right-hand search box for Gulf Freeway PEL Study. Enter the virtual public meeting link and click on the comment form under the download section. Again, please submit your written comments no later than midnight on Friday, July 29th, 2022 for your comments to be included in the public meeting documentation. We encourage you to stay engaged in the Gulf Freeway PEL study and invite you to view the various study materials on the TxDOT website. For example, the public meeting materials, fact sheet, study reports, schedule, and other information are included on the study website. Lastly, Don't hesitate to contact us with any questions at any time during the study. Please feel free to contact the TxDOT Project Manager, Caitlin Cantu, at 713-802-5272 with any questions or comments. Questions and comments can be submitted at any time during the study, but comments will only be included as part of the official public meeting documentation if received during the comment period. Thank you for your participation and interest in the Gulf Freeway PEL study. Please complete the online survey and submit comments by Friday, July 29, 2022.